Hello, everyone. So, AI. Who's tired already of AI? Give me a hand. Who's tired of the headlines with AI? Everything's an agent today, right? I'm wondering whether you would agree with me that the AI space is somewhat in a weird place in 2025, because on one hand, we have humongous investments in compute, in infrastructure, and we have tremendous models being released every other week, both from the commercial or open weights perspective. But at the same time, we start to see headlines saying 95% of AI projects fail, which, by the way, is a huge misrepresentation of what that Source MIT report really said. And past couple of weeks is an avalanche of voices saying that AI bubble is growing, and it's taking us into a very dark place as humanity. What I want to do today is cut through this noise and really tell you about things that we as web pros believe are very important from the web enablement ecosystem perspective, and things that are just worth watching in the months and years to come. My name is Pawel Rzeszucinski. I'm the Senior Director of Data and AI at WebPros. In the past couple of weeks, I've been living my childhood dream on social media, trying to look like James Crockett from Miami Vice. But what I found is that I didn't have the guts to wear this today on stage. Well, one day, James, I'll make you proud, I promise, but maybe tonight, we'll see. When I was thinking how to summarize AI in 2025 with a single slide, I had a couple of slides in my head, but I settled on this one. It is a figure from Bloomberg, and it shows how a relatively small number of players in the market engage in multi-hundred-billion-dollar deals to accelerate compute and accelerate the development of data centers. It's actually the largest buildup of infrastructure in the modern history. What's interesting is that a lot of these deals are like circular deals. And the size of the bubble, by the way, is the valuation of the given company as of last month. So if you see this, you know, it's natural to think with all this investment, surely there must have been a couple of breakthroughs that push us as humanity forward. And you're not wrong. Today you can talk to your pigs, if you have them, using AI translation. That's pretty neat. If you feel like you're walking too slow, you can have AI-powered shoes that will increase your pace threefold. If you think you've been brushing your teeth the right way, you can have an AI-powered toothbrush that will probably prove you wrong. And if LLM hallucination wasn't a problem in itself, you can go to AI-powered church in South Korea. So this is the type of noise that I'm talking about. And it doesn't really help an average consumer to see what good things are really happening underneath. So in my talk, I'll tell you about 3 trends that we have embraced at WebPros for the benefit of our partners and their end customers. So I'm going to start with something that's been already discussed today in the panel, vibe coding. This is the graph that shows interest over time this year, seen from the perspective of Google Trends when people search for phrase vibe coding. It's been framed by Andrej Karpathy, who's a prominent figure in the space. And it basically describes a change in a way that we create things, where we no longer have to write every single line of code, but AI is there to help us. So when I look at the vibe coding as a thing, we already have a couple of flavors to it. The very first one at the beginning was a heavily developer-centric approach, where you needed a very skilled software developer that would write majority of the code himself, herself, and the AI would just help with little snippets of code, auto-completions. the barrier to entry was really high. You had to be a skilled software developer, and AI helped you in here and there. But then as the models became more and more capable, we moved into this hybrid approach, where it is more about like pilot, co-pilot setup, where AI is capable of understanding large blocks of code, but also generating these large blocks of code. So now the barrier to entry dropped a little bit. You still have to understand what's going on in the code, but you don't really have to write everything yourself. AI is helping you more. And then at the end of the spectrum, we have these no-code solutions, where essentially AI writes everything for you. You just have to describe what you want the AI to build with the biggest programming language of this year, which is natural language prompting. And here there's no barrier to entry. Everyone can build stuff they want, prototype stuff they want. So I think it's worth reiterating that vibe coding is not about removing software developers. You still absolutely need skilled teams to create robust, scalable, maintainable solutions. But vibe coding, it redefines who gets to build. And it's a fantastic thing. And this is what we embraced at WebPros when we developed Nova. And with Nova, all it takes is a conversation. You describe what you want the AI to create for you. Nova guides you through the process. It improves your prompts. And it goes on creating whatever you described. You can naturally iterate, you can improve, you can revert back if you don't like the changes. But at the end of the day, you deploy to production with a single click, which is fantastic. If you still haven't, please check our booth, where you have exclusive opportunity to play with Nova in real time on production. But you can also scan this QR code to request exclusive access to it. When talking about managed services, I cannot not mention WebPros Cloud, which is our fully managed infrastructure for hosters, resellers, registrars. The core of it is the infrastructure, obviously, but together with it, you get a lot of managed solutions, like the managed WordPress hosting by means of WP Squared, or our billing and automation solution, WHMCS. Soon, we'll be putting more, managed email service, or the Nova itself. You can scan the QR code again and learn more about WebPros Cloud, or just come to our booth. So the second trend is generative search optimization. Has anyone heard about generative search optimization or AI search optimization? So it is like SEO, search engine optimization, but we're seeing a paradigm shift in how people look for information online and how brands and services are discovered online. Let's look at some numbers. This shows a year-over-year traffic as attracted by classic search engines between 2024 and 2025. Classic search engine traffic dropped by 0.5%, whereas the traffic attracted by LLM chatbots went up by 80%. Now, I could stop here to make my case stronger, but I think it's worth looking at the absolute numbers too. And this comes from one little web as a source. We can see a slightly different picture here, right? So the classic search engine traffic dropped by 0.5% from 2 trillion visits to roughly 2 trillion visits, whereas the LLM traffic went up from 30 billion to 55 billion. Okay? There is a third dimension that I like to look at it. The same report created this figure, which goes one level deeper, and it's about the specific source of the traffic. What I see here is one thing. The Microsoft Edge, which is the second most popular browser on the web, generated traffic that is also almost on par with what LLM chatbots generated. And this is big. And what's worth noting is that this report was created at the beginning of this year. This was before LLMs could do like they couldn't pretty much do anything on the internet. This was before LLMs could natively search the web. This was before the biggest providers had native integration of third-party apps like Booking.com or Shopify. That was before the entire MCP idea or standardization took off, and I'll talk about MCP in a second. And also, this is before the main providers started to introduce payment protocols that allow agents to do transactions online. So this tide is rising. The generative search optimization is growing, and it changes how people find your brands and find your services. That's why we created AI Signal, which is a solution that allows you to see how your brand and your services are seen in the results of LLMs or in the eyes of LLMs. We also show you how you are positioned against your main competitors. But I think the best thing is we give you just very actionable insight based on specific examples from your website, what you should be changing in order for your position to go up, to be looked at more favorably in the eyes of LLM crawlers. So scan the QR code to learn more, or just come to our booth and we'll show you how what this is about in more details. So the third trend that I kind of alluded to is the MCP, Model Context Protocol. It is a standardization in how LLMs interact with external services developed by Anthropic. So before MCP, if you wanted your LLM to interact with external service, you had to create and maintain custom API connections. Obviously, every provider has a different API connection. You had to maintain it. Something changed on the, let's say, server side, you had to update it in your code as well. There was no context about what you wanted to achieve. It is very transactional. And the iteration cycles, if you want to do some A/B testing or test different scenarios, was pretty long because you had to update the API connections every time. What MCP gave us is a standardization in this connection. LLMs can now talk to external services by means of this standard. There is a full contextual awareness of what we want to achieve because we communicate with these external services using plain language. And because of this, the prototyping is much, much faster. You just describe in plain language your different scenarios, and off it goes. Now, what we see in the market is that companies put MCP in front of their core offering so that LLMs have an easier job reaching out to these services. And that's fine. This is what we're trying to do at WebPros as well. But we also try to look at it from a slightly different perspective. When we consider web enablement ecosystem, so everyone here at this conference, in this room, in the exhibition area, we are one big organism, and there is countless numbers of web hosting providers, CMS platforms, control panels, website builders. It's next to impossible, with the emphasis on next to impossible, to really monitor what's happening behind the scenes. What are the changes taking place from month to month? And this is, we think, we can help our partners get insight into information that is otherwise difficult for them to obtain. Because every month, we crawl more than 2 billion host names on the internet looking for information like the distribution of CMS on domains, or what's the ratio between websites having SSL or TLS certificates versus no certificates at all. All the information you can fetch from DNS, like, for example, presence or lack of MX records, or information and distribution of different website builders. So what we want to do is to give our partners access to information so that they can ask us things about their business. How many domains migrated away from me as a hoster last month? Where did they go? How many domains have any content on them? So do they, what's the percentage of websites that resolve or maybe return an error? Or what's the percentage of websites that have SSL certificates, which is a pretty neat upsell information right? So I'd like to hear from you. If you scan this QR code, you will be taken to a form where we ask you what type of information would be really interested from your perspective as our partner. If we could have the QR code for a second or two, maybe more, to give people the opportunity to scan it, but also you can just come to our booth for me to be able to tell you more about this. So to recap, vibe coding, again, it is changing who gets to build. And with Nova, everyone can build. All it takes is a conversation. And once you're happy with your creation, you can deploy with a single click. Generative engine optimization, generative search optimization, it redefines how people look for information online and how brands and services are discovered. And as I hope I was able to convince you, this tide is rising. So it is the time to look at how you're being positioned and what's ahead of you and what to do to improve your situation. And last but not least, MCPs, Model Context Protocols, they gave AIs superpowers in a standardized form. So apart from putting MCPs in front of our core services, we also want to give our partners access to the data that is otherwise difficult for them to obtain. So with this QR code, just please fill out the form and we can get the conversation going, or just come to our booth to learn more. That's all. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for attention. And I'll be happy to take any questions, I guess, off stage.